Today, we will see how we can implement some of the advanced feature from the POC requirement. The first requirement we have is right-click on the grid header to open the menu pop-up. So this is a grid. You right-click on the header, and then you should be able to see a pop-up menu that has menu items like enable header sorting, disable header sorting, freeze column, unfreeze column, hide cell column, reset grid settings. So for our product registration, this is the grid where we want to add a pop-up menu when you right-click on the header. So here is a pop-up that we created. To create the data for this pop-up, you have to define an inner data set. And this, you define a caption column. So this is the text that you would see in the menu item. You also specify the ID column. So this is the ID. This is the value that you will see when there is a menu click event. And then you define a label column, which is 0 here, which means these are the top level menu items. So you also need to add an event on menu click. So when you click one of these menu items, this will be where you define your handler. So you click, you have a menu click event, and then here you can see, you can get the ID. So this is the ID that you defined in the ID column. So now that we have a pop-up menu, we want to add the pop-up menu to this grid. So for that, you add an event. You can specify R button down, so which means when you right-click on the grid, you will see this event. So when you right-click on the header, the row that you get is -1. -1 means you clicked on the headband. If it is a positive value, that means you clicked on the body band. So when you click on the headband, we want to show this pop-up menu header, which is what we have here. Now let's look at what these menu items are supposed to do. And then we will look at how it's implemented. So this is the application that I have. I search here. I right-click on the header, then you should be able to see this pop-up menu. So if I right-click on the body, I see a different pop-up menu. So let's look at the pop-up menu. Enable header sorting, disable header sorting. So I click on the enable header sorting, and then I click here. The selected column is sorted in an ascending order. So if I click here again, this is sorted in a descending order. So I can do this. So it's ascending order and then a descending order. So for this example, the columns are sorted by only one column. So whatever column you selected. And then when you click on the disable header sorting, it will remove the sorting event from the header, and then you can no longer click on it and sort it on ascending or descending order. The sorting functionality in the grid is implemented by setting the key string property of the dataset. The format is S colon and the column ID. So when you specify S, it's for sorting. There is another option you can specify as G, that's for grouping. But for sorting, it's S. And then plus is to sort the data in an ascending order, and minus is for sorting the data in the descending order. So if we omit in the signs, like here, by default, it is in ascending order. So you can also combine columns to do a multiple sort. The syntax is S colon column ID 1 and plus or minus column ID 2, and so on. If you want to remove the sorting, you can use an empty key string. Now let's look at how the sorting is implemented. So on the pop-up menu, you have an on-click event. We go here. The ID column for enable sorting is enable sorting, and disable header sorting is disable sorting. So first you add an event handler on head click to the grid with an event handler on grid click handler. So when you click on the header, after you enable the grid header sorting, we are getting the cell count of the headband. So it gets the number of cells in the header. Then you get the head text using get cell text. The -1 here is a headband row. So we're getting the header text. If the head text is not null, then we get the text length, the last index. And this is to see the current cell that we clicked on the header. So for that particular header, we get the text not from the head, but from the body. So if you look here, this is the grid. And if we look at the design source here, this is how it looks. This is the headband. It has the cell and the text product code. And then corresponding to the product code, there is this band in the body that has the text, which says which column from this data set this column binds to. So this second column binds to product code from the data source associated with this grid. So we want to find this product code, the name of the column. So we need this information. So that is what we are doing here. We're getting the column ID from the body. We're getting this data source that is associated with this grid. If that particular column is already sorted, then it would have an indicator at the end, either descending or ascending. So here we are trying to reverse the order. So if it's already in a descending order, now we want to set the key string in the ascending order. So there is a plus here for that column. And then we leave the header text with the ascending order. If it's in the ascending order, we want to set it in the descending order and change the header, the arrow in the header. If the column was not previously sorted, we sort it in an ascending order and we do the up arrow key. For all other header cells that we did not click, we remove the arrow indicator from the previous column. So this is how, when you click on the header, you sort the column of that particular header in an ascending or the descending order. Now let's look at how we can disable shorting. So for all the cells that are in the header, if there is an indicator, we are going to remove the indicator. And then we set the key string to empty string, so removing all the shorting. And then we also remove the unhead click event handler from the grid. Now let's look at the other menu item, freeze column and unfreeze column. So when you freeze column, so you select a header, you right click and freeze column. That column should be frozen. And then you click unfreeze. So this is also called fixing a frame by column. Okay, let's look how it's implemented. So you have a freeze column. So this freezing column is happening on the left. So you could have also done on the right, but for this example, it's only done on the left. So the freezing column, to freeze the column, you have to set the format column property for that particular column. So you define the band. So whatever you want to freeze on the left side, all the columns, you set the property to left. All the ones that you don't want to freeze, the band is set to body. So here we are getting the cell index of the column that you clicked. And sometimes the cell can span more than one column. Like here, the product name is span one more column. So we are getting the column span, and then we get the total column span. So from this, from the first column until that column, we set the band to the left. And for rest of the column, you set the band to body. And then when you want to unfreeze the column, all you do is you get all the columns and then set the format property, the band to the body. So this is a grid. If you look at the column, by default, the band is body. But you have an option to choose if you want it to be left or right. So well, I made the first column to the left. I can make one column to the right, So I have the left, this column 0 is left band. All these columns are body band, and this last column is right band. So if I save it, so now when I scroll, you can see the first column is on the left band and the last column is on the right band. Now let's look at another menu item, which is hide and show column. So when you click on a column and do hide or show column, it should either hide or show. So I click here, the column is hidden. I want to show the column again. It shows the last column that was hidden. The hide and show column. To hide or show column, you can use the set for column property, format column property for the particular column index, and you can change the size. So you change the size to hide the current column, and you change the size back to the previous size that you saved to show the column. So the last item on the menu item is reset grid. For that, you can save the format when the form loads, and then when it's time to reset format, you set it back to the grid format. So if you look at the grid here, look at the design, you can see the grid has formats. So it can have multiple format. The one with the ID default is the one, and you can, if you have multiple formats, you can choose to set the particular ID as the format. All right, that's all.